Sup Shredders! My name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we've got ourselves 3 tracks from an X named 2 of 13, the first of these titled Latte, offered their latest EP titled Singles. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves the entirety of this latest EP on their Spotify page here. We've got the very cute little calico kitty here, Singles. We're going to be checking out Latte today, as well as I Tried featuring ABBA-CONDA X4XX and My Savior, which I should note just while I remember in case I forget that it sampled Living in Truth Ministries TV, so that's cool, just giving due credit there. I've already checked out Guncube and Fracture, the album mix. Good to check out more. We're going to listen through each of these 3 tracks from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Just also confirming that I'm going to be scoring each of these 3 tracks based on various musical criteria, but for now, yeah, we've got Latte. Let's do it. Very active. That's a severe sound, but I kind of dig the edge to it. A dissonance thing. I mean, that was such a feral sound distortion, but I kind of dig the kind of heaviness of it. The production style is fascinating. That's the filthiest snare, dude. Okay, so that was Latte, track number 1 off of the singles EP. So in each of these post-track sections, I'm going to provide an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique. And then there's going to be like an overall analysis at the end of these 3 tracks, as well as my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But before I go any further, I just also want to mention I gave this track a 7.6 out of 10. I feel like that is a strong score. There were some personal highlights for me. It was a visceral experience. It was intriguing. But what do we think, what do we think this track is about? I'll level with you. I'm not entirely sure. I heard some parts of the lyrics there, and I can kind of get a feel for what we might be going through. We talk about some parts tearing us apart, but also ordering a drink, which when you consider the latte part makes sense. Maybe we're talking about ordering something, but then and maybe not being what we wanted. We thought we were getting something that would help us. Maybe it's our coffee, maybe it's our way of waking up, but that thing actually kind of destroyed us. I'm not quite sure. The way that we sing within this is kind of it's very intense. It's very organic. It's very almost kind of therapeutic in a weird sense. I get the feeling that this is a way of the singer to kind of just express and sort of explore things that they're either going through or that they simply just want to talk about. And I like that. I think that it's good when you can be as openly expressive as this, whilst also being comfortable. It kind of reminded me a little bit of something like the Deftones and some of the music I've heard from them, and I mean that's a compliment. Deftones are dope. But it's just the kind of breathy expression there, the strain that you can hear in terms of the way we're getting these words through clearly, the lack of trying to sort of forcibly enunciate stuff, the kind of non-committal kind of nature to some of the words that we're putting forward there and that we're singing there, the difficulty that we're having trying to sort of pull ourselves through it, the way that the vocals are kind of washed out in the mix for a lot of the part. It's very interesting music. Now, I think to tell a story across a track like this, even with the distortion at the end, you need to be just interesting to listen to. And even though I didn't get all the words through clearly, I nonetheless appreciate the tone and texture, and what did come through makes sense to me. It harmonized neatly with surrounding elements, and I think for the style of music we're doing, it's appropriate. I think outside of a really competent vocal performance, where I think if you consider the subject matter I discussed earlier and how the vocals were done, I feel like there's a connection there. They make sense, the release at the end especially. You contrast that to the start of Latte where, first of all, this track is 5 minutes long. And it's outside of the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot where if it's over 4 minutes, you start needing to sort of change things up and sort of adjust the feel and mood of stuff and do different corporations of bass lines in order to keep a track interesting. But I feel like we handle that really neatly here. If we go back to the start of the piece, it's just very kind of timid and quiet with that guitar line, that kind of brightness, the sort of the cuddly glow of the single coil is neat. But then it's immediately contradicted almost by the vocal style that we have here with the reverb and the chamber aesthetic of that, with the drums coming in with their kind of chain tone. And it's a very interesting snare groove. We're competent on the kit. I do like the cymbal kick and snare patterns there. I like the kind of rustle and kind of rumble to it. I like how it's by no means a polished tone on the drum kit there. It's ready to kind of throw down there. It's got a kind of a raw, rugged texture and sound there where you can hear the room mic. I like that it's kind of heavy and feral sounding at times, but that it also knows when to step out, such as at the 1 minute mark, and allow you to sort of sit with the other surrounding elements. I like the fact that the drummer as well was also sort of decorating with some little ghost notes and bits of extra articulation in the same way that the guitarist was playing around with some interesting sort of triads and extended chords and kind of doing asymmetrical stuff again around the 1 minute later. We're picking on one side and strumming on the other with slightly different guitar tones. There's some really cool ideas. And as we kind of build, as we go through the 1 to 2 minute mark, then we add additional guitar layers and we maybe even add a bass in the low, and then we start rising towards something. You get the feeling that they really do genuinely understand how to develop a track. I do like the kind of the plucky, rotary, kind of twisty, turny kind of sound. We have the super chimey part around the 2:10 mark there. It's just a very sort of distinct texture. It's like a mandolin or some other kind of alternate plucked instrument. It's sort of a surreal texture in the piece there. It's almost too pure to be a part of it. And as we add those ride bells, such as around the 2 minute 30 mark there, with the vocal having a similar kind of affectation to it, right up until the end, You really do. You learn to appreciate all the different ways in which they're trying to get their instruments to sound. And as we go into almost like a shufflish kind of thrashy, grungy groove around the 254 mark, and we had the distorted guitars kind of very feral on the sides there, thick and full and almost kind of sludgy, you know, heavily resonant in the mid-range there, the bass sort of not pronounced, but like definitely apparent. It's just, it's an interesting mix because it's not trying to necessarily follow a lot of the standards of the norm. Such as when we kind of peter out and around the 3:50 mark there, we simply have a lot of those kind of washier textures there. We get heavier for a moment, but we don't necessarily want to go thick and too much, you know. And we kind of have these unpolished snare sounds again, as I mentioned prior, continuing and into those blast beats we have in that last section of the song, and it's just filthy sounding. It's just so raw and so horrific. They sound like they're genuinely struggling. That breakdown there with the down-chugged power chords there, the John, it's just ruthless, man. It's such a contrast to how relatively timid and palatable a lot of the earlier examples were on the keys, or the strings, should I say. I think it's just great to use that last minute or half minute there to do something completely different, to sort of, at the very least, insinuate that we have range there stylistically and compositionally. And I think that if this is your first time listening to 2 of 13, you at the very least understand that this is going to be a hell of a ride. But yeah, honestly, a really tight performance across the guitars, bass, and drums, and on the microphone there. I think that the free-flowing organic nature of the performance with like slight adjustments of tempo just kind of sounded like they were playing in the same room, and I really do genuinely dig that, especially in a world where a lot of people are not necessarily playing their music at all. It's just very cool to have those additional sort of sub leads around the 3-minute mark as well during those chorus, that kind of parts. So it just really, I'm happy with this song. I think that thematically, minor leaning with some extensions, or maybe it could be a major key, but the distortion makes it sound so dangerous. I'm not really sure how to approach the theme of it. It's almost like it's bright enough to try and get you to think that it's kind of peaceful and kind of pleasant, but the textures are so kind of repellent in contrast to that. I think that you've just got a lot of different suggestions coming from a lot of different things, or at the very least you've got an A and a B side that are fighting against each other until we explode at the end. Ultimately quite well fleshed out, really solid performance, and the studio recording, mixing and mastering in part was so effective because I think it was so alternative. It's a track where, and this is an experience I've had with Fracture album mix as well as GunCube, we really are not trying to meet the needs or make music for other musicians. I think that we're trying to make music for ourselves. I understand that should be a given, it just really isn't in this day and age. They are just, it's the most authentic, it is some of the most authentic music I think I've heard in quite a while. It is just so unfiltered, which is ironic because there is some filtering in here. It's just great that we don't feel the need to make our music sound like other people. I'm not trying to sort of say, I'm not trying to be nice. I'm not trying to be kind. When I listen to a track like this, I can kind of recognize, hey, that is 2 of 13. If you aren't sort of distinctive enough with the way that you produce, you will get like confused for someone else. And so I like the fact that we have this kind of style of music where there's just all this kind of like brutal stuff going on, but then it's belied by a lot of the stuff before it. There's dynamic range, stuff surrounds you in a stereo fiddle, like the paneling, different elements like the guitars, stuff like that, as well as the drums kind of fiddling about. I think that the way we do the echo and delay, reverb on the vocals is nice. It spreads around the stereo field. Nice and loud, bus compression limiting is handled, and it's great to return to their music. Got track 4 off of the single. So got track 4 off of the EP, or track 2 for today. I tried with the 2 of 13 ABBA-CONDA X4XX. Something completely different.
I got 44 hands,
'What a fascinating introduction there with these vocal chops, and keys and guitars.
Smoking cigars like Dons, masked ons, looking for gold like leprechauns, sitting in the chambers, spinning on Capadonna, when right for the industry sweeteners.
It's such a busy track, I'm not sure if I necessarily like it. It's not that I dislike the individual components, but it's just the way that they come together.
Seating heretical chambers, puts the woman on the throne so they can fire her later. Mass dons.
I mean, it's phenomenal contrast, I just don't know if I understand it. Yeah, okay. I think I get it. So this is track number 2 from 2 of 13 and ABBA-CONDA X4XX, titled I Tried. Track 4 off of the singles EP. I hear all the references to like talking, you know, like we mentioned Lucifer and some sort of references. We talk about Madonna. I think there's Miley Cyrus's. There's reference to a lot of different things. And if I listen back through the track a few times, I think I'd probably be able to sort of like figure it out. And it's not like I dislike the rapping itself, because I think the rapping sounds great. I'm not sure if it necessarily benefited from having the additional kind of distorted layer on most, if not all, of the vocal takes in those rapped parts. I feel like we could have potentially just, if nothing else, just been like a little more subtle with it, just simply to provide sort of further kind of like permanence for the vocals within the mix, just because there's a lot going on there compositionally in the sides of the stereo field. And I think that when you've got simpler vocal lines or slower ones, it makes a lot of sense. But when we've got more going on, like there's speed to it, there's like a flow and a cadence to it, that is, you know, rap and hip hop, you've got to be really careful about the way that you sort of put that forward. I think it's because of that I gave this a 7.1. Don't get me wrong, this is still a strong score. It's just me being level in the fact that there were some parts of this that just I need a bit more time with. I think maybe this is one of those tracks where we had a lot of things we were trying to accomplish, and we couldn't necessarily, especially near the end, kind of figure out what we wanted to be more prominent. Or maybe these were all the different voices and iterations of things in our head that we're kind of working through. Maybe I Tried was all these different things, and maybe the music is swallowing us whole as we sort of ruminate on what we tried to do and what we were unable to accomplish. I'm not quite sure. In terms of actual vocal technique, though, I think ABBA-CONDA X4XX did great on the microphone. Really happy with the way they sort of held themselves and Prince in the mix outside of any production or composition decisions. The rhythm and kind of like the way they held themselves and carried through there, and the way they kind of bounced along to it is fantastic. They're very, you know, comfortable on the microphone. And I think that we also might have had 2 of 13 with some vocals at the end there with a really visceral kind of black metal-ish kind of scream at the end. And I thought that was done well too in terms of technique and everything like that. It was very kind of like reverbed out and spacey and misty. And I thought it was just a cool idea to have that as a part of a layer of the ether, even if I'm not necessarily sure what we were trying to sort of like add to it, maybe like in terms of the words themselves. It was almost like there might have been just a bit too much chamber reverb for me. But I also understand that might be the style we're trying to go with, so it's a difficult thing. I think it's the difference between, you know, like score. This is why I'm very careful about scoring people in the first place, is that I understand how subjective music is. I mean, like, I like the melody, the For You, the part there at 2:35 there. I like that kind of tail and the way it kind of flicks upwards. From 2 of 13, I thought that was kind of neat. There are parts of the vocals I like, and I think the track at 3:30, if you simply try to sort of take it at its own level and understand the kind of experience you might have for the 3.5 minutes in the first 30 seconds, it makes total sense. You start with these kind of music boxy or kind of like fun sort of key sounds there that are kind of submerged underwater there, and it's very busy from the get-go. You have some other vocal chops that are down that lower range from an old sort of like sub-layer, and it's intriguing immediately, primarily because of how much you sort of have to absorb And the way that it slowly spreads around the stereo field is the way the music envelops you in the headphones, and you really feel like you're going somewhere really cool. And I also kind of dig the fact that the intro took so long to kind of come to fruition. I think that it was kind of neat to kind of listen to the track expand over time and really kind of gain its own wings and sort of like presence within the piece. I thought it was neat to not have a similar, like we didn't feel the need to immediately get into the verse and be a bit kind of paranoid about that. And also I want to sort of mention that I like that we're doing something different with the raps. It's not that I dislike the fact that the rap part wasn't cleaner, that's not at all, because there are a lot of people who are already trying to do that. I think like the way that we kind of panned or filtered the vocals in the mix as well was great. We had these kind of fluttering keys that were circling around the sides of the stereo field there in that mid-range there. They arpeggiated really well. And we had like lots of fun ideas on the kit as well, with a mixture of on-beat and syncopated kicks and snare patterns there with a kind of a shuffle triplet groove to it. And we had like lots of buzz rolls and other little elements there. It was neat. There's great articulation on the kit there. I do appreciate like a lot of the actual artistry there. And like having, again, those screams at the end was a wonderful contrast to the warmth and calmness of those keys there. We had phenomenal contrasts within this. This is not obvious decision making that we're doing here. We're taking some artistic risks, and that's okay. I think for the most part, they work out. I think when you had the distorted guitar alongside those distorted vocals, it makes sense texturally and just kind of reinforces it. I thought there were some parts, like there are some guitars that are strummed in a way which is either out of tune or like a deliberate discordant part on the left, and I'm just not really sure how it interacts or integrates with the surrounding elements. Like there are a lot of really pretty sounding parts, but then we have just kind of a discordant guitar part that's sort of slow strummed on the side there, and you're just kind of trying to figure out what is it meant to sort of illustrate. They're in like a dreamland, but then there's like a sense of like guilt or like a negative emotion involved with that. But it was a nice sort of contrast when the distorted guitars come in. I must say I did like the kind of push they have on that. And it's also cool to have the bass and the low end to kind of warble and kind of ride in the ether there. And it's also cool to have a different style of music as well, because this is a different style than we've had in previous tracks, Fracture, Guncube, or Latte. It's nice to see that 2 of 13 is trying different styles and different genres and trying to sort of find their place and explore the possibilities. I think that's sincerely very good. It's also cool to have collaborations where we try and get the most out of the other musicians that we're with as well. I dig that. I think that is just one of those situations where I just might need more time to appreciate the song. Ultimately, though, outside of a couple of chromaticisms or sort of moments of sort of mild discomfort, I think generally the performance itself is great, and I think that it's just an interesting, unique concept in isolation and a fun addition to this EP. Thematically, minor-oriented, extensions though to add a bit of emotion and nuance, sophistication to it. Totally happy with that. Again, a lot of the feel is from the way that the instruments sound, what they present with, their size, their heft, their edge to it, etc. So I think that's cool. Or the understanding that that bass line kind of continues for the majority of it, if not with very little variation, partly because you had that kind of core beat and sort of fleshed out and sort of manipulated stuff as you went along and when required in order to maintain interest. You have a track where the production again is deliberately alternative there. The vocals do have mostly mid-high-range resonance. We have the bass like stacked neatly in the low end. There's push to the drum kits, but the drum kits aren't playing simple beats by any means. There's a bit of sass and kind of variety with them. They're not just pocketing, you know. And then you have the guitars and the reverb tails of the vocals and everything like that. And I can hear a connection to previous tracks within this album if I have kind of time to appreciate kind of how different it was beforehand. But you know, nice and loud, bus compression, limiting is handled, and a really curious one. But we're going to check out My Savior, track number 5 or 3 for today, I suppose. so quite unique. Filthy, man. Those pinches, dude. It's just fun to have those pinches go into this almost kind of...
See, we were originally designed to be like God. That's why God calls us to be righteous as He's righteous. Because that's how He designed us to be. That's how we were supposed to walk on this earth. As His mirror images. We were meant to be God incarnate on this earth. Not only you actually are God. No, I mean, when people would look at you, you would seem like the child of God that you were designed. The creation with awe and the splendor of God's glory, because God's glory is in you. That was the original design. But sin corrupted that. We've fallen short of the sight of God. Every time we sin, we've done something that's against God's nature. Showing something that's opposed to God. That's why God hates sin. And every single one of us has done that. No one has been away from sin. In fact, Paul makes it clear in Romans chapter 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I'm sure you agree with this as well. Could you think of any one person who's actually perfect in every single way and has always been perfect? In every single way. From the day they were born to the day they died, they were perfect. The only person I can think of is Jesus. No one else in the world can claim that they were 100% perfect.
Really fascinating track. That one. I that's interesting. So that was My Savior, track number 3 for today. I gave that one an 8 out of 10. I was really happy with that one. I thought there was a lot to appreciate in this one. I just feel like it's a culmination of the progress that we made over the last few tracks and pushing into any new sort of like opportunities we're going to get up to. It's just great. I think to have a song where it discusses something. I kind of got the hang of what it was about fairly earlier on, but then you also, again, you had that recording from Living in Truth Ministries TV where they discussed, you know, like people's imperfections and it's okay to like not be perfect and that you can find sort of like hope and love in God and everything like that. And that basically it's okay to sort of like show love for your Savior, you know. And I think for people that kind of identify with that theology and that belief system, and also, you know, like I just think it's a beautiful thing. It's true, you know, regardless of what you believe, and people are just objectively not perfect, and it's okay not to be perfect, and it's okay to want to find help. I think part of what sells this is just how immensely intense the vocal styling is. The screams that we've had mirror some of the affectations we've had in previous tracks within the EP, but it's just on absolute overdrive. We have the 8th string come in and it just kind of smashes your teeth in. And it's brutal and visceral, and it's such a contrast to the echoed, soft-spoken nature of the spoken parts later on there, when there's nothing else around it. It's such a cool use of distortion and fry there. It just sells... It's such an interesting contradiction, you know. A lot of the time when I listen to music like this, it will not be in the style of vocals. It'll be a lot more kind of soothing and gentle. This is brutal. And we go between some more sort of soft-spoken or softly sung parts there, a la, you know, Latte. But we do stick with the heaviness for the most part. And I just like the fact that we're unabashed and unrelenting with our authenticity towards expressing ourselves in a way that makes sense both with the music and the subject matter. I think the kind of struggles we're going through, calling out for someone, the intensity of our feeling about that, and then like another alternative, or like aligned perspective to that later on the piece to kind of cut us out. Structurally, really quite effective. I think immediately it slams in there. You have that of the guitars at the start, then it's like holy crap, and you don't get a chance to really react to it. It's just poof. And you've also got the kind of, this is an interesting follow on from I Tried, where we've got this kind of trappish 808s and these clicky kind of like cymbal parts and these snares there, and it's not something I've really heard a lot of, but I kind of dig it. And it just kind of contrasts so heavily with the spoken sort of like sung parts, the softness and sweetness of those around the 40-second mark. And there's this like kind of like cicada, like kind of like almost a surreal tone. It kind of like it nuzzles at your earbuds a little bit. It's a little bit disconcerting, you know, but it's still a cool idea. And you have those kind of spicy, fizzy guitar parts at about the 1:10 mark where you've kind of gone away from that kind of heaviness for a moment, but you still kind of feel like it come back at any stage. Great use of pinch harmonics and those loop tails. And we return to that softer motif with the pads, you know, those extended pads, the 808s and the drums. And it's almost like we kind of hear the thoughts come back, and it's almost like we need someone external to ourselves to help fully be okay with the situation that we're in or the situation around us. I like the fact that the instruments gently peel away as we get into that last section as well, as if like maybe the music is the noise in our head. And this is kind of like I Tried, where like we have all these sort of surrounding elements trying to sort of overwhelm us there, and we're just trying to sort of like remember that we put in the effort to try and change things. With My Savior, I think the interpretation that potentially is that the music is the noise, and eventually you come to a moment of peace when you understand the truth of the matter. Ultimately, though, I feel like it's just nice to have like that intense dynamic range to it, the mixture of different drum patterns, the use of those basses being quite minimalist in response to what it could be, like especially rhythmically on the drums. The guitar is a different type of guitar with the 8-string there, the kind of fury behind the distortion, the heaviness of the ruthlessness of it being really cool. And the bends and the pinch harmonics and the kind of the clashy kind of sub leads there on the sides, they're adding a bit of extra sort of tension to it. And just, yeah, we have some really like an interesting amalgamation of different styles or genres in a way that does kind of work, I suppose. Like, it's not a typical one. I haven't really heard music like this before, but I kind of dig it as a new kind of angle. We're just finding a micro niche, I suppose. Thematically low, minor leaning, even though there is some softness to those ending elements there. There's an intense sadness that we feel, or like an anger or a rage there. But maybe we do resolve to the major later on. I think it is an extended minor though. There's like a nuance to it, but we are trying to sort of find peace with the fact that we are imperfect. So I think the music communicates the duality of those two different kind of experiences with what we're discussing, whether it's rumination and sort of like letting loose. I'm not quite sure. Either way, I think it kind of goes off of some of the stuff we did at the end of Latte. It's a nice kind of callback to that. And there was never any filler within this one. Honestly, structurally really compelling. Studio recording, mixing, mastering, great use of sampling. Again, it was nice to have that clarity within it. It was good also to have things spread around the sides of the stereo field. The guitars are nicely double tracked. They're great sort of bends and sort of like squealies and bits of articulation there. Bass drums in the center, sprinkled around the sides. Great use of sort of like dynamic range. In those parts, we had those kind of cymbals coming at you. I think the vocals were double tracked as well for a bit of width there in some of the verse parts, which was kind of cool. And yeah, nice and loud, bit of bass compression, pumping, limiting is handled. And I think we've got the boxes ticked. So we're going to talk about these tracks more in the conclusion. Welcome to the conclusion of my review of these tracks from my next name 2 of 13 off of their singles EP. These tracks titled Latte, I Tried, featuring ABBA-CONDA X4XX, and My Savior, again featuring the sample of Living in Truth Ministries TV. In this section, we're going to be talking about these tracks from like an overall perspective as opposed to a per track one, because we've already done sort of many conclusions per songs. Lyrics and vocals all the way through studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. I should also note that I've given these tracks an overall score of 7.6 out of 10, which I feel is a strong score. There's a lot to appreciate within these. But before we go any further, what do we think Singles is about? I think Singles is a concept that being the EP up in the top left corner, it's about Latte effectively trying to consider the choices we make in our life and wondering if we've made the right order there, and eventually getting to a point where we can't decide and re-release. I Tried, featuring ABBA-CONDA X4XX, is more about, I think, all these different things that we've done in our life and sort of getting to a point where we tried and we just couldn't figure it out. We did all these incredible things, these kind of crazy different quotas and stuff like that. We just couldn't really find peace. With My Savior, the third and final track today, I think it's more, especially with the kind of the screaming and the shrieking and stuff like that, it's more trying to calling out with the pain that we're in. I think the music eventually goes down in intensity because of the Living in Truth Ministries TV sample part that we have, discussing how nobody is perfect and it's okay not to be perfect, and now we just need to try and show our love and faith and do the best we can to get through today's understanding that is reality, that no one has been perfect since they were born. So I think this is the journey we go through here from Latte, I Tried, and My Savior. I assume that follows from Fracture album as well as Gumcube, which is why they're part of the same thing. I mean, like either way, I like the different stories. I like that it wasn't always immediately obvious what the tracks are about. I like that I had to think about them. I think the vocals in general from Tour 15 were great. I mean, ABBA-CONDA X4X's vocals were very sort of like well handled. They had great sort of vocal technique, rhythm, and cadence there. They're very easy to listen to. Like they had presence in the mix outside of some of the vocal modulations and stuff that I spoke about during that section. I just feel like it was maybe a little bit too busy. But outside of that, just, like really great, a collaboration there with Tour 13 coming in afterwards with some of the sort of sung vocal or spoken parts and then their screams. And I think that part of what made these tracks work so well is that we aren't trying to sort of over-articulate our vocals here. We have the propensity to be able to almost do a Deftones-ish kind of like tired sing kind of spoken part there, where we, I think, accurately show that we've been going through some stuff and that we're trying to work some stuff out and that we're struggling with it. But then we are so, like at the start of My Savior, we're so aggressive and it's so in your face and disconcerting. You really have no, if you hadn't listened to any previous tracks, you'd be like off, you wouldn't be off-putting, but you'd be like, well, what is happening here? What are we doing here? I feel like to be able to appreciate this EP, you need the context of the tracks before it. So again, if you haven't heard Gumcube or Fracture albums, I'd recommend doing so. But ultimately, the vocals are well handled on the microphone there. We hit the notes we need to cleanly. We're not trying to sort of make it too virtuosic. I think we're trying to sort of go more for a connective tissue kind of meter and timbre to it in a way that coalesces and lifts up the experience, as opposed to trying to be the main sort of focal point the entire time, especially with the reverbs and delay tails we have on certain parts. The way we filter, the way that I Tried, we literally wash ourselves out with chamber verb in order to be able to become a part of the ether. The tracks are typically between 3 minutes 29 to 5 minutes, with Fracture being shorter than that. And I honestly think that these are good lengths for songs. We have a mixture of different sort of verses and stanzas, and it's not necessarily like verse, chorus, verse, chorus. Most of these, if I'm not mistaken, if not all of them, are through composed. And I think that's just a generally sensible thing in a situation where you're not necessarily trying to make super catchy tracks. I think some of this music, especially with some of the more intense stylistic contrasts, is more meant to sort of be an experiment way for Tour of 13 to kind of play with different shades in their palette and sort of explore the possibilities. I think the main instruments that we had within this were predominantly guitar, bass, and drums, although to be fair, we had some synth pads, some 808s and stuff, and I Tried in My Savior, and I kind of dig that. I think that there was this kind of hypnotic mysticism about it that allowed it to kind of sit quite neatly within it. It was almost too busy in I Tried with the layering. There's so much stuff going around. around, but I think we did find a balance in My Savior, and Latte, of course, is very good. In terms of the drums, we had a mixture of acoustic and electronic beats there, some sort of chirpy, single, kind of clicky, kind of like hi-hat parts with some pushed kicks and sort of clicky kind of snares, and some of the more hip-hop, kind of rap, art rage and oriented ones. And other tracks, such as, again, Latte, we had those acoustic kind of like snares and hits and bells and kicks and all that kind of stuff. Very kind of grounded in comparison to that. It's very kind of like, hey, I'm going to sort of like show you the full wrath of my analog setup. But it's also relatively gentle at points. We understood when to kind of hang back, when to not have any drums at all, when to sort of add more drums forward. We had a good balance in terms of the percussive meter within these tracks as a general rule. And we sort of followed metronomes nice, and we followed the tempo well, and we knew how to play dynamically in a way that was appropriate surrounding elements there. I just think it was wow, there was chemistry there. Bass lines were typically 808 sort of root note oriented, though we did kind of explore the free spectrum sometimes. And I like the fact that there was that kind of buzz and pull to it, though, that we weren't sort of overcomplicating, and again, that we pocketed when we needed to. The guitars had a variety of different sort of picked parts and sort of like strummed patterns and arpeggiated moments, and other points, some distorted, heavier kind of stuff at the end of Latte, if I'm not mistaken. Chugs, you know, like the squeals that we had, the 8-string stuff going on My Savior, some of the other kind of crispier, kind of glowy mid-range stuff happening in other pieces. Like, there's a lot of different interpretations of the guitar parts, but ultimately I feel like they typically worked well. I mean, with the exception maybe if I tried with that kind of off-bit that happened like near the end in certain respects, just on the left side of the stereo field. But I think it was, again, deliberately kind of dissonant there. It was meant to sort of make things sound uncertain, especially with a lot of the other parts surrounding it sounding kind of tight. So if that's the case, then that's totally fine. I just think there's probably stuff I'm missing, but I think back through these tracks and they're all so unique. They were typically the major or minor oriented. They did have, and you know, in terms of thematics or themes, thematics, they had extended harmonies sometimes. There was some Fregiometal kind of flat second stuff in the chugged elements, but we weren't trying to complicate or make it too sort of jazzy or experimental with the chromatics. It was more about the different styles and the kind of sort of hip hop or the kind of sort of death metal kind of blast beats, or the grunge, or like the rock or the old or kind of the doomish kind of stuff, or the kind of the ambient electronic stuff. There were a lot of different styles that we put into this in a way to make a really enthralling collection of tracks that is very unique and sort of sincere to what I thought, as well as ABBA-CONDA X4XX, anyone else was trying to accomplish. It's a very personal EP, but I feel as if the chord progressions and bass lines and note choices that we had made a lot of sense. There was never a moment where, like, again, it was busy and I tried, but I could imagine why that might have been. I do wonder if it was heavily symbolic. And just generally it's just the studio recording, mixing and mastering left, where I think across the board, the guitar, bass, drums, vocals, seat, keys, synth, any other effects were well handled across the stereo field and free spectrum. Again, I've spoken about I tried and that we might have had a bit too much going on sometimes. Like, we had vocal modulation on top of the rap bit that I feel like might not have needed to have been there, but it was just simply, I think, trying different colors and seeing what worked or what shade worked alongside another. I think with the reverb delay parts and the filtering of the vocals, the distortion on them as well to make them sound a bit more intense, we knew what we were doing and how to get the sound we wanted. It was a kind of a dirty, filthy experience listening to it at times in terms of how like unpolished it was, but it was like a deliberately unpolished sound where we had the room sound of the microphones and everything like that. Nice and loud bus compression limiting is handled. Like, it's just a really astute performance, and it's just, aside from, again, like how the busyness of I tried there, I'm really happy that I had the chance to review this music. It's some of the coolest stuff I've heard in quite a while. From a final general listener's perspective, I just noting as well that the vocals were not overproduced despite the kind of the frequency change and FX change they had on them. I listen to this and I think, where can they go from here? And I genuinely don't know. I don't know where 2 of 13 is going to go, and I love that. I love that I cannot accurately predict what they're going to do next. It's such a rare thing, and it's exciting because it means whatever they're going to put out next is going to be worth listening to. Sometimes you get people who put out an EP and it's their kind of work, and they'll do more of the same thing because they'll think that's what will make them successful. But I feel like we're just going to continue to evolve and grow over time. I wish them all luck in future for the musical endeavors. But thank you for watching my review of this track from an act named... Thank you for watching my review of these tracks from an act named 2 of 13 off of the singles EP titled Latte. I tried, again featuring ABBA-CONDA X4XX and My Savior with Living in Truth Ministries TV included. Hopefully you enjoyed them. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and their Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on the world. And I will catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.